Kathy Balasek is an empathy and grief communications coach, university lecturer, speaker, and podcast host. She also teaches at California State University. Her mission is to cultivate a grief-literate culture by improving the language of loss. Kathy is visiting us from Chico, California. Welcome, Kathy.
Hi, David. Thank you for having me.
Welcome. So we're going to talk about grief, and I think it'd be helpful for the viewers to get a little bit of background. So can you share with us your story and what you went through?
Absolutely. So I was widowed in my 30s, very young, and faced with raising 5 children on my own.
Wow.
And, we had it all. We had great careers, healthy children, money. And I went from being basically a soccer mom to a caregiver to a widow. And my journey through that, I consider myself now a seasoned widow because it's been several years. I've learned that widowhood is financial, and you become the sole decision maker, now, later, and all throughout life, because you learn to walk alongside grief. It never really goes away.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. So with that, you obviously are very much in touch with this community. And I know a lot of work you're doing, you're actually giving advice. You mentioned financial, do a lot of work with financial advisors and helping them understand the whole dynamics around widowhood and what's involved. Why do you think the focus on widowhood is growing, or also why widowhood in general is also increasing?
There's a variety of reasons. And, widowhood really is a gender neutral term. It applies to both men and women. However, most people just associate it with women because the numbers lean that far. It's typically 4-to-1, women to men. And with COVID, that increased numbers. We have women that are now entering the baby boom age, that are now entering the death boom, sadly enough. And 70% of baby boomers will experiencing widowhood. And, it's a very sad number that 80% of men die married. And so you find yourself in a scenario where it is women. And these women of a certain age did not have an equal representation with the long-term finances. And so they're faced with all of these decisions and feeling ill-equipped, that really forces an opportunity to learn more about how to care for yourself in the future.
Very good. Well, and you kind of got into my next question, which is what are the implications of what's happening? So we've got the just the math, basically the math, and you mentioned the boomer population, but you've also got a greater emphasis, which I think is a very good thing. What are some of the implications in terms of this beyond just the heightened awareness? Are we seeing much more involvement on the part of both men and women in their financial dealings? Are you seeing companies put a lot more focus on this? Where are some of those trends? What's going on?
The great news is that we're seeing this trend happening. We're starting to see awareness and a modernized approach to widowhood. The average age of widows is 59 years old. We're changing perceptions. They're not your 90-year-old grandmother in a rocking chair. And so really changing how we face bereavement leave. We look at Social Security, pensions, all of these things that are so dependent upon jobs, careers, marriage status, that really put the woman at the disadvantage in the end, because they are living longer, on average 15 years longer than their spouse.
Why do you think our culture is still very grief illiterate?
Well, David, I mean, it's hard enough to get people to talk about money. Now we've got to talk about death and money, right?
Right. Yeah.
And the problem is it's very awkward. We were never taught how to talk about these things. You know, we know how this movie is going to end. We all die, but we don't want to talk about it. And it's really hard for people to put themselves in my shoes because that's exactly where they don't want to be. But empathy is not putting yourself in the context. Empathy is meeting them in the emotion. You know, you can't imagine what I went through with widowhood, but you can imagine the emotion that I went through. And so you meet people there. And so we want to talk about all of the wrong things and unsupportive things you say to dismiss somebody's grief or justify somebody's grief, because we really want to quantify it because we want to fix people, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm that awkward friend that walks in the room and makes people uncomfortable. So this is a conversation to the world. We have to acknowledge people's pain.
Yeah. Very well put, Kathy. Well, and I think you mentioned fixing things, you know, especially men. You know, you tell us something's a problem, we know there's something problem. We're like, okay, well, how can we fix this? We want to do something about it. Great information, Kathy. I think you've helped people really kind of open up their eyes a little bit on this subject. So, Kathy Balasek, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, David.
If you would like more information about the topics and our guests featured in this series, please visit our website at PlanStrongerTV.com. Also, if you have a question you would like David to answer, please send it to questions@PlanStrongerTV.com.